Hello and welcome. I'm really pleased to welcome you all here today. I'm Steve Hoover, the CEO of PARC, and we're really pleased to have a very interesting set of speakers, a panel really, this afternoon for you, and the topic of frugal innovation. And I'm really excited about it for a couple of reasons. At PARC, we're always interested in innovation and new ways to think about and drive innovation. And I think Navi Raju, who's written a book on this topic and has put together this panel, has really done a nice job of framing a whole set of opportunities that come from looking at innovation differently, and where you're really focused on this idea of how to do more with less. And it's interesting because I think innovation is often about putting two things together that are apparently mutually incompatible. And you know, in Silicon Valley, we focus a lot on performance and capability, and I think focusing on cost and how do you do more with less is a really powerful idea, as well as a focus on serving the underserved. PARC has, made its brand in democratizing technology, giving access to computation to people who didn't have access to computation. And I think at the core of frugal innovation, much of it is about empowering the world through technology, which is, I think, an ennobling and a powerful concept. So I'm really pleased to introduce Navi, who will kick us off and set up the panel. So welcome.
Thank you. Wow. Steve, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And in a way, Steve touched on many of the key points I'll be addressing today in trying to define what is frugal innovation. So we have a exciting, super exciting panel. I don't want to steal the thunder from my fellow speakers. So the flow of the next 60 minutes will be the following. I'm going to take about 12 minutes to set the context and define what is frugal innovation. It's a very new concept. So we'll spend some time explicating what it is. And then we will have 4 pioneers from the Silicon Valley area who are actually practicing frugal innovation, who will come on stage and introduce their companies and the platforms that are enabling frugal innovation. So what is frugal innovation? Well, let's begin with where we are in Silicon Valley. So let's figure out how kind of the innovators in Silicon Valley think. Many of them may be thinking this on Monday morning when they come to work, which is, what if my fridge can talk to my smartphone? Sounds a very interesting idea because most of us, we have a fridge at home and we all have a smartphone. And so if I run out of milk, it would be nice to get an SMS, a text message, so I can fetch a gallon of milk on the way back home. Sounds interesting. It's a very interesting what-if question. But somebody in India asked himself a more fundamental, big what-if question, which is, what if my fridge can operate without electricity? That's a big what-if question because 700 million Indians live off the electricity grid. Interestingly, this question was not asked by someone with a PhD from Stanford or an MBA from Harvard Business School. It's actually invented by Mansukh Prajapati, someone who didn't even finish his high school, is a potter by training, who invented this fridge made entirely of clay called Mithikul. It actually uses the principle of evaporation to keep fruits and vegetables fresh for 5 days and milk fresh for a couple of days. It cost about $50. So the lesson from this example is that resource constraints, lack of resources, instead of being a limitation, in emerging markets become a source of innovation, an opportunity to create value for oneself and others. That's what's happening in Peru, a country that has 95% humidity rate and receives only 1 inch of rainfall every year, like California. So a local engineering college in Lima invented this giant advertising billboard that condenses humidity in the air, purifies it, and generates 25 gallons of drinkable water every day. Okay? Again, we don't have water, but we have a lot of humidity. So we convert humidity into water. So this is something I introduced exactly 3 years ago, right here in this auditorium, when we did a talk entitled Innovation Under Constraints, which shows essentially how constraints can be a source of innovation. Because when necessity is mother of invention, I always say scarcity is the grandmother. Okay? So, and that's really what was the focus of my first book that came out 3 years ago called Jugaad Innovation. So Jugaad is a Hindi word that means make do, or what I like to call the MacGyver spirit, which is to come up with clever solutions in difficult situations. So in the book, essentially, we try to formalize what is frugal innovation. So what is frugal innovation is the ability to do more and better with less. That is essentially create more value using fewer resources. So what kind of value we are talking about? Not just economic value for shareholders, but also societal value. And then when it comes to resources, we are talking about reducing financial resources, capital, of course, but also natural resources like water, and then time, because time is a scarce and most valuable resource. So when you save on time, you improve on performance as well. So now what's happening in emerging markets is that the spirit of frugal innovation is being embraced by companies to scale up solutions that deal with basic things like healthcare, energy, education. This is M-Pesa in Kenya, which is a mobile service that enables people to send, receive money using the mobile phone without having a bank account, Today, half the population of Kenya uses the service, and over 40% of the country's GDP is transacted to this system. What's amazing is that once you have mobile money, you can use it to avail all kind of products and services, not just fancy stuff like gadgets like we do in the West, but basic services like energy. I'm talking about clean energy. This is a solution that enables Kenyans to use mobile money to get solar energy on a pay-as-you-go basis by making a daily micropayment of 40 cents using a mobile phone. As a matter of fact, President Obama, who recently visited Kenya, take into account this M-Kopa system and was quite impressed by the scale and reach of the solution. But of course, frugal innovation goes even into space. The NASA actually sent a mission to Mars last year. It's called MAVEN. It cost $700 million of taxpayers' money and 5 years to develop this solution. 2 weeks earlier, a few days earlier, India's own satellite entered Mars orbit. The difference is that they developed this system 10 times cheaper and 3 times faster. It's called frugal science. Why this was possible? Because India, again, leveraged what is abundant within India, which is software capabilities, to compensate what they cannot do, which is to build physical prototypes, like the NASA did. So you can see that industry after industry, and even in science, it's possible to do more with less. And then a few months ago, I published my new book called Frugal Innovation to show how in the West there is a need to do more with less as well. And this is being driven by the fact that, as you know, there's growing income inequality that also contributes to social inequality. For example, many of you may not know that 1/5 of the population in this country, that's about 70 million Americans today, are underbanked. They don't have a debit card, credit card, or access to a saving account. So you can imagine that's the size of the French population, which remains to be tapped right here in our backyard. And people are also becoming of lack of resources like water, especially in California. As you know, this is going to be a big issue. So as a result, are things gloomy? And not really. As a matter of fact, what we see emerging is what I like to call the frugal economy. This is an economy where entrepreneurs are using 2 pillars to build this frugal economy. The first pillar is sharing, and the second pillar is making. So sharing is the ability for us as ordinary citizens in a peer-to-peer fashion, share our apartments, cars, and anything we have, including our skills. And this is something that people like Airbnb have enabled, as you know. But it is going to actually grow as a market from about $15 billion today to $335 billion within 10 years. So this is a frugal way, essentially, for people to share goods instead of buying and owning stuff. The second big trend is making. This is where citizens say, I don't just want to share stuff, I want to start making my own products and services. This began with the Maker Faire right here in San Mateo, and it's growing in sophistication because you now have access to some very cheap components that are very sophisticated in terms of technical capabilities, and yet allow you to come up with very amazing devices. One of them is this little baby. It's called Raspberry Pi, invented at Cambridge University. It's actually a personal computer the size of a credit card. It costs only $30. 5 million people have been using it to come up with all kind of crazy inventions, including space exploration. On the right-hand side is Arduino, which is a microcontroller which costs $30, which also allows you to come up with devices to interact with the physical world. So as a matter of fact, this maker movement, and I think Mark Hedge from TechShop will talk about how his platform is enabling the rise of makers, but this is something that is not anymore a hobby. It's something that is being deemed of strategic priority for President Obama who actually hosted the first Maker Faire at the White House last year, even have a senior advisor now in his cabinet to advise him on how to convert the Maker Faire, the Maker movement, into a true economic force, and Mark will talk about that. So to conclude, though, I want to show how actually the universities in the US actually are also starting to train a new generation of frugal innovators. This is in Stanford. It's called the Entrepreneurial Design for Extreme Affordability, which is a multidisciplinary program that enables students to think laterally and come up with very frugal solutions, including one that Mark will talk about in a few minutes. At MIT on the East Coast, the Indian company called Tata Group has endowed a major center called the Tata Center for Technology and Design, where they are also training MIT engineers to think frugally and come up with very affordable solutions for low-income people around the world. And then finally, last but not least, right here at the heart of Silicon Valley, we have Santa Clara University, which is also a driving force behind this movement. And we have Silvia Figueira from Santa Clara University will talk about what they're doing there in terms of training engineers to think frugally as well. So with that, we are going to transition to the fun part of this event, which is to actually introduce you to the pioneers in Silicon Valley who are actually leading the frugal innovation. And for that, we are going to actually have first two entrepreneurs. We are going to have Bruce Borden, the CEO of gThrive, and Michel Ktitareff, the VP at Bbound. We're going to talk about how their startups are actually enabling frugal innovation. And then we are going to go one step further and show how, with Mark Hedge, the CEO of TechShop, and Silvia Figueira from Santa Clara University, how they are building a platform to train an army of frugal innovators out of Silicon Valley. So I'm going to first invite Bruce Borden from gThrive to come on stage and show how their solution is actually a godsend for California. Bruce?
Thank you, Ravi. Actually, some of my roots go back to Xerox PARC. When I was leaving college, I decided on a job at Rand instead of PARC, and went down there for a while, and then came back here to start 3Com with Metcalf, and did the first commercial TCP/IP, which came from Xerox PARC, of course, the Ethernet. Worked with the team that developed that. So I've done a lot here in the Valley, and now moving on to do sensors for agriculture. And so very briefly, this thing has 5 sensors built in, a radio, processor, does all the work inside, communicates with the world, and I'll have another slide that shows that. It's got soil moisture, something called EC, electrical conductivity, which is pretty simple, but it's a good proxy for saline or fertilizer in the soil. Soil temperature, which is important for some customers, air temperature, and sunlight. And we're finding customers using all of these for purposes we never imagined when we started. So this is designed to be pushed in the ground, and you're off and running. Now, some of the key items here, and it's really important, you put this in the ground, how do you know where it is? Use your smartphone. So this and this go together. There's a QR code on the front. There's also an NFC tag in here. You scan it or scan the barcode, use the GPS from this, you know where you put it in the ground. So everyone's got one of these, and we tell people who don't, go get one, right? I don't want to reinvent a user interface. I don't want to reinvent a screen. I don't want to have GPS in here because it's too expensive and takes too much power. So this way, you literally just scan it, put it in the ground, walk away, and it shows up on your screen, okay? So you need a base station. My big bugaboo, and I'll encourage the people at PARC and everywhere else, come up with a better solution. How do you get the signal from here back up to the cloud? That to me is one of the big missing pieces of the puzzle. So we use 802.15.4, that's the radio under Zigbee. We talk to each other and to the G-Link. This is not a mesh. Can't be a mesh, because if you're a mesh, you owe CIPCO 5% of your sales profits. There's a patent on that word, essentially. So everyone avoids it like a plague. So we have our own protocol. And this can cover hundreds of acres. So you can have a base station, spread these things out. We have one several acre field with 18 of them for research, and then we have 100-acre fields with 4 of them. And that's what we normally sell as a kit. So how do you use it? You go put these out in your fields. Think of a grower. Some of the key stats here, 60% of US farmland is absentee landlord owned. That's something most people don't think about. They think big ag owns everything. No. People retired in Florida own most of the farmland. And they lease it or crop share it to growers, to farmers who actually do the work, and then either share the profits or just pay a lease payment. Well, they'll often farm 10 or 15 or 20 different fields spread all over several counties, and they spend most of their time driving field to field to field looking for problems. So one of the ideas is you plant one of these kits, G-Link and 4 of these or more, into a field. You wake up in the morning, you look down your list of fields, you see where there are problems, you drill down. Our goal is not to show you a ton of data. If you're a farmer, do you really want to be looking at charts? No, you really want us to give you advice on what the problem is. Take the next step. It's like, okay, it's getting too dry. And we see a cycle that shows that each of your irrigation cycles is getting drier. It will be too dry in 3 or 4 days if you don't make the adjustment today. So we give you all that, then you go off and do whatever you're going to do based on our advice. For now, go adjust your irrigation. In the future, once you learn to trust us, then we'll do closed loop irrigation. Okay? That's not today's solution. It doesn't work. So now, let me spend a little bit of time and talk about some of our examples. Okay? Everyone loves strawberries. Turns out most of the strawberries in the world or in the US are grown here in California. There's something like 58,000 acres, and about 40,000 of those are here in California. It is perhaps the highest value crop out there in the world. Conventional strawberries, about $40,000 cost per acre before you get any revenue. That's cost to sterilize the field, to buy the strawberry plants, to fertilize them, to irrigate them, and then all the labor it costs to pick them. So your costs are very high. But if you manage it well, you can gross $50,000 to $60,000 per acre. It's pretty common to get around $10,000, maybe $15,000 net per acre. So you can make a living on 10 acres of strawberries. Now you go organic and the numbers get shockingly higher. Right now, the input costs might be a touch higher because you can't use some of the pesticides and other things, so you have more labor. But those organic strawberries sell for $80,000 to $100,000 per acre. So you can make a lot of money. Well, you gotta manage the water. The water drives your yields. And one of the key things, the reason we have EC in here is our first strawberry grower said, I need to know how much salt is in the soil. A lot of the strawberry plants are out here on the coast along Watsonville. They get a sea breeze. And that, believe it or not, that winter breeze, all that air coming off the ocean drops salt on the soil. Then, if you don't get enough rain in the winter, the little rain that does come washes the salt down into the root zone and basically prevents the plants from growing. I mean, I didn't know any of this. I'm not an agronomist. So I will encourage everyone, go listen to some of the things Steve Blank has to say about listening to your customers. What we have here is driven by our customers. A stake they can push in the ground. That came from the customers, right? EC came from the customers. Soil temperature came from the customers. So give you an idea on water, in agriculture, and I'm spending a little time on this because it's a field that many people here in Silicon Valley don't know. 1 acre by 1 foot is an acre foot. And that's what's used for a measure of water in agriculture. And a typical crop, like strawberries, is 2 to 4 feet for a whole field of water every year. That's how much water goes on. Now, most of that returns to the ground, okay? But that's how much is needed to keep the plants happy. If you put too much on, you wash out the fertilizer. So again, the EC tells you if you've got a fertilizer problem, so you can come back and add fertilizer into the irrigation through something called fertigation. There's another thing that we didn't know, and you learn from the customers. If you overwater in the rows between the fields where you're picking, the rows between the raspberries or blackberries or strawberries gets wet, the pickers won't go there. They won't pick where the ground is wet because it slows them down. And they're paid by the bucket. So if you overwater, that part of the field rots because no one will go near it. I mean, it's just surprising things we learn time and again. So we help the growers make money, that's why they're interested, by saving water, power, monitoring and managing salt, and improving yields. Okay, other extreme. Okay, we've gone from the tip of the pyramid on the value proposition down to the bottom. Corn is some of the least profitable product per acre that you can grow. Now you say, why is there so much? Well, because Monsanto and others have given you tools so you can grow thousands and thousands of acres but with just a few people. And so you make it up in volume, and this is a case where you really do. There's about 90 million acres in the US of corn, and a typical net is $400 or $500 per acre. So if you have 1,000 acres, you can make some money, but it's still not as much as 50 acres of strawberries, which is shocking. On the other hand, it's a way of life, and we have a massive amount of it. Organic, the farmers we're working with who are converting are making much better money, upwards of $2,000 net per acre. So there is still an opportunity. We encourage sustainability. We love that. A bunch of ideas. You plant this in the ground in the winter. When the spring rains come, you know how wet it gets. You know when it's gotten dry enough that you can go and plant. If you bring your seeder out onto the field, it sinks right in. And then you've got a mess. You've destroyed the field, and you've got to tow it out, and you've done a lot of damage, so you don't want to do that. If the soil's not warm enough and you seed, then your yields are way off because the seeds don't germinate. Or they germinate at a much lower rate, so your yields are way off. So you need soil temperature, EC, moisture. That's where we got all this from our customers. Again, I'm not an agronomist. And then, again, the corn needs about 2 to 3 feet of water. Rain is the normal source, but when you run out, you irrigate. So we help people decide when to do that, and it's very costly if you miss, okay? So let me run through very quickly, and then I'll wrap up so that everyone can get a chance. We've got kiwi vines where they're monitoring the sunlight under awnings because kiwis don't like sunlight. I didn't know that. Citrus, frost warning, very important. Potatoes, you have to get just the right amount of moisture in the ground, otherwise McDonald's won't buy them from you because they don't make good French fries. I mean, it's amazing things like that. Brussels sprouts, they literally stress them to the point where they drop all their leaves. Then they put a ton of water in so they plump up and they can sell them for more without having to pull the leaves off. It's just wonderful. So we reduce driving time, we reduce water and power, and we improve yields. And we find that there are purposes. People are telling us what they're doing all over the country with this. And people have said, do one crop. And we said, yeah, well, no one does one crop. Even corn growers do soybeans in off years. It's called rotation. So with that, on to the next.
So you can imagine, California being the 5th largest producer of food, how this kind of solution can be, really a boon for the state. Next on stage is going to be Michel Ktitareff from Be Bound. This is also one of my favorite examples from my book because while everybody is going from 3G to 4G to 5G, they seem to be going the opposite direction. Let's find out why.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. So, this one?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So, yes, as Navi just said, where there is a permanent race toward, more and more bandwidth, actually, we are going to the opposite direction, and we do more with less, meaning we use less bandwidth to help people to communicate with on mobile phones. So our Frugal innovation is on mobile communication. And before I start to explain how we do that, let me show you a video. This video, we didn't shoot we didn't shoot it. It's the Bloomberg agency. They came to us, they found us, and they quickly understand what we do, and they put us in perspective towards the big shots. And so let me show that to you. Good.
1, 2, 3.
This helium balloon could hold the solution to a big problem. Today, 4.5 billion people are without internet access. Google is betting on the Loon project to solve that, a floating hotspot powered by solar panels, able to stay afloat for 3 months, pretty much anywhere. But Google isn't the only one tackling the problem. Facebook wants to build special drones. Elon Musk and Richard Branson, mini satellites. French startup B-Bound has another idea.
Well, our solution is the fastest to deploy because it works now, and it's extremely cheap. There is absolutely no infrastructure investment required.
B-Bound has created an app to make better use of the 2G networks, which already cover 85% of the planet. It's already partnering with local operators such as gThrive in Algeria, and has ambitions of extending to Asia and Latin America.
With a low bandwidth, you can have Facebook, email, Twitter, geolocalized services, search the web. You can have 80 or 90% of what you're doing, but not videos.
Connecting the planet is a big task that requires a mix of solutions, and none is perfect. The Google balloons, for example, will need to be retrieved after losing air. But if this solution is viable, thousands of these could circulate the Earth in just a few years.
So it's pretty nice to be compared to Google and those big ones. But the thing is, the way we do it, it's very different from theirs, because again, you know that they will rely on satellite and balloons. Our solution is ready today. It doesn't cost anything to the mobile as MNOs, the mobile operators, and it's very affordable for the most users, for the users. So what we do is very quickly in a main advantage. First is compression. We have developed an app, so you have seen very quickly the app, and we transfer data, but before transferring the data, we compress it a lot, and we saw that this is a one way to use much less bandwidth than the comparable mobile apps. Coverage, because since we are accessible on any mobile network, we also we can show our technology. Our solution is available almost everywhere, because since it's available on 2G networks, and 2G networks cover almost everywhere on the planet. And of course, it's also very less costly than regular data plan, because again, we use much less data than other regular solutions. Okay, so also you have already understood that our main customers are not located in Silicon Valley. We are most successful in developing countries. I spend 70% of my time in Asia, and also we have already customers, and we are deploying our solution in Africa, in Middle East. And actually the solution we bring to the people who are not yet connected or mobile, they'll already use, in most of the case, feature phones, but not yet smartphones. It's because they lack infrastructures. You have not 3 or 4G everywhere, of course. Relevance, it's very important, because People are very interested to have local content. It can be local news, it can be weather report, it can be anything, but it has to be local, especially in their own language in many countries. And of course, the cost. So we bring answers to that. We bring answer to that three main issues for them. But what is also interesting in on our point of view is we don't bring only new connectivity to more people. We also enlarge possibilities, especially in creating new apps relying on big data. Because if many more people are connected everywhere, they can send information, for example, in a pre-crime situation when you can send an info about if the place you live is secure or not. And some apps already exist, but if you have more people sending more information, you can map in a better way. So we also improve the development of this new kind of apps, since we provide a solution for many more people to be connected. And of course, we like to be compared again to these big guys, but the big difference between them and us, it's again not only there is good advantage, of course, for the user, but our go-to-market strategy is not to go directly to the user, but to work with the MNO, mobile operators. And for them, we have very good relationship with 90% of the one we have already met, and hopefully the next ones too, because the solution is available now, but there is no infrastructure cost, no capex for them. So that means they can propose right away the solution. When they agree, when we decide on which apps they should propose to their users, very quickly, in a matter of weeks, they can offer the solution to the user. So they have no investment, and our model is to, of course, this solution generate revenues, and we share revenue with them. So it's a no-brainer in terms of investment for them. So that's it. And of course, I'll be happy to answer a question as the Q&A session.
Thanks much.
Thank you.
Michel. Thank you so much. Great solution. Now we are going to transition, having listened to two individual entrepreneurs driving the frugal revolution. We are going to have Mark Hatch talk about TechShop, which is actually, I would say, a factory that produces army of frugal innovators. Mark, the floor is yours.
So this was about a year and a half ago. We had the president visit TechShop Pittsburgh as part of an advanced manufacturing conversation, and then the day before the launch of the maker movement. I'm sometimes asked, isn't the maker movement a fad? I mean, this is just kind of a cute thing where people go out and hang out at the fairs, and kids come around, and the burners launch all kinds of propane gas explosions into the air. And my answer to that is yes, it is a fad, just like the web was a fad, famously. There is a difference, though. The estimate by Deloitte is it's going to be 8 times larger, because it turns out we operate and work in physical space most of the time, and as a result, the income from it is going to have a much larger impact over time. And so it's encouraging to have the president holding my book up. We've got copies in the back. My publisher insists that I do that, so buy it early, buy it often, and give bunches of them away. I'm going to talk just kind of about what's happened, because I do get this where they say, well, it's a fad and it's really about craft projects. So this is David Lang. David came to us and said, I don't know how to make anything except for a really good email, and I'm going to take all of your classes in the next 30 to 60 days and then try to become a Maker Pro. 9 months later, he launched an underwater robot company. So the equivalent of a quarter of classes and then 6 months of dwell time. He now runs the largest open underwater robot company in the world. He sold over 2,000 units. These things are being packed into both poles, and he's become a leading light in the citizen science world. Britt Morin came in. She quit her job at Google, came up to our location in San Francisco. It's 20,000 square feet, every tool you need to make anything on the planet, machine tools, woodworking, plastic, electronics, textiles, 3D printers, laser cutters. on a complete educational staff to teach you how to use it, and most importantly, a community of people who will gather around to help you build your dreams. Britt came in, started doing all kinds of crafts projects, actually did all of the crafts for her wedding. And at the end of her wedding, all the folks that came said, I want these projects. Can you kit them up for me? And so she launched a little company called Brit & Co. It's not so little anymore. She just closed a $28 million Series A. You'll see her often on Good Morning America and other shows. She's been described as the Martha Stewart of the Silicon Valley. This is Ken Hawthorne riding one of his electric motorcycles. Ken came in and used the tools to build the world's fastest electric motorcycle. It did 218 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats about 4 years ago. He competed in Pikes Peak this last year. I feel sorry for the rest of the motorcycle field, and particularly the Italian riding the Ducati Monster, which came in second, 20 seconds after Ken crossed the finish line. Ken had a massage and a beer by the time the Italian came across the finish line. It's actually, I believe he's opening a showroom here in Palo Alto, and just in a few weeks you'll be able to go into the showroom and buy one of his motorcycles, and it will do 218 miles an hour. It's a remarkable thing. This is one of my favorite stories. Mark Roth was homeless, living in a shelter in downtown San Francisco, saw a brochure that talked about TechShop, came in, spent his last $50 on a sample program we had. For $50 you get a free membership and a laser cutter class. So he took the laser cutter class, the next day came in, grabbed scrap out of the scrap bin, used it to make some things, went out on the street and sold them. Step and repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat. He then became so good with the laser cutter that other members started hiring him at $25 to $50 an hour. He put together a small war chest and leveraged some friends that he had developed inside the community, bought his own laser cutter, launched his own laser company, hired a bunch of folks, and he now runs a nonprofit that's helping other homeless people leverage maker tools and maker education to remake their lives as well. It's a fabulous story. I didn't even know about it until I read about it in VentureBeat. This is Tina Albanlock's. Tina launched a company accidentally. She came in, took the laser cutter class, started making cupcake toppers for some friends. Friends of friends wanted them. Friends of friends of friends wanted them. She launches an Etsy store. She disappeared for a little while, and she came back, and I said, Tina, where in the world have you been? She says, well, Mark, you know, my education and background and training, I'm a labor organizer by training. Didn't make a lot of money there, you know, married another labor organizer, and we never went on a honeymoon. And so I just got back from a 6-month world tour with my husband that we had put off. So she's actually doing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on Etsy through cupcake toppers, not even knowing that she was going to be in that business. But this is Max Gunwald. Max came in, learned how to use the tools that he needed, including learning how to use an Arduino. The Arduino was important because it allowed him to prototype this particular device, knowing that it eventually had to be down to a PIC processor, and it had to have a lithium-ion battery and a whole bunch of other things that he didn't know how to do, but he could prototype it. And then another key piece of the ecosystem is Kickstarter, where you can now get things funded. Lifestyle businesses can be funded. You actually, 1, you get money, 2, you get direct feedback from customers instead of like focus group, fake customers, and you get market validation for the product idea. Now, he told me he needed to raise $60,000 on Kickstarter, and I told him, Max, that is a very bad idea. Half of all the Kickstarter campaigns over $2,500 fail to fund. $60,000 puts you in the top 10% overnight. Who in the world is going to fund a lamp company to the tune of $60,000? It turned out lots of people. He raised $480,000. Very successful Kickstarter campaign, easily in the top 10%. He had to quit his job, go into manufacturing. He was on Shark Tank this last year, final season. All 5 sharks bid on his company. He came in with a $3 million valuation. He walked out with a $6 million valuation. You know, not bad for a 24-year-old kid wanting to be in the lamp business. Again, we've got hundreds of members. I've got 8 locations across the U.S. We've got 7,000 members. We've got about a dozen in development. This is one of my favorites. So this is Patrick Buckley. He came in and asked, what classes do I need to take to learn how to use, to learn how to make an iPad case out of bamboo and bookbinding. It's a beautiful, beautiful little packet. 90 days later, he had sold $1 million in product. You know, what did you do last summer? He did $4 million in the first year, $10 million in the second, $35 million in the third. We believe he's going to do $60 to $100 million this year. He's got a manufacturing facility in San Francisco. He saved a bookbinding company. He's got 35 full-time employees. He's off and running. And actually, the President of the United States carries one of those around. He was one of the early adopters, bought one of the very first ones. It's an absolute one of the early beautiful cases. You can tell because of the side that he's got. When the president met with us, he was very proud of it, had somebody go hunt it down, a Secret Service guy hunt it down and to kind of show it off. It was pretty cool. But we had a theory early on. If you give the tools of the Industrial Revolution to the middle class for the first time in history, for a price that they could afford, $150 a month, they would change the world. We've had 6 different projects come out that have. I'm going to show you 2. You're probably familiar with this. This is Square. So this is James McKelvey. He was the co-founder. It was actually his idea. Jack Dorsey was his partner. He called Jack up and said, hey, we've been wanting to do something together for a long time. Let's do this thing. I've got an idea. I just lost a commission because I couldn't take American Express. I don't understand why my bank won't let me take American Express. And they charge me $130 a month for a silly terminal. So I'm giving them $1,800 a year, and I can't even take the money that my customers are trying to give me, and they charge me 3.75% for the benefit. We can cut that down. We can make it available to everybody. So he pulled a PowerPoint together, and they went and talked to the 10 smartest investors on the planet and promptly got turned down. Yeah, this is part of the story most people don't know. The smartest investors on the planet turned Jack Dorsey, one of the most brilliant entrepreneurs of his generation, down on a multi-billion-dollar business idea because he didn't have the domain expertise. And James was a glassblower by training, so he didn't have the domain expertise. And they basically told him to go take a walk. Jack, if you come up with a Facebook mobile app, let me know. James, give me your brochures. I might buy some glass. So James said, forget that. What we need to do is build a functioning prototype. He came to TechShop, learned the skills that he needed, milling, lathe, injection molding, relearned soldering, picked up the electronics that he needed from the members in the community, and they went back, and this time, instead of doing a PowerPoint, they just walked in and said, give me your credit card, ran the credit card through, picked $50 off each of the top 10, kept the $500, and raised $10 million in your Series A. And the punchline that I go here is, how in the world do you expect your university professors or your students or your or people inside of your company to be able to convince a bunch of gray-haired MBAs that your project is worthwhile without a prototype? If Jack Dorsey can't raise money without a prototype, how in the world do you expect other people to do? And the world has changed. It only cost a few $1,000s to get started. And then this is my favorite one. So this is Jane Chen. Jane came out of the D School, and they had this brilliant idea of trying to help save some of the 500,000 babies that die every year from being born too early, 2 or 3 weeks, hypothalamus isn't developed, they can't regulate their temperature, they have 1 hour to get to an incubator, and literally 500,000 babies die every year. It's World Health Economic Organization statistics. She said, "What can we expand it by like an hour?" So Naganon was on the team, and Naganon came up with this idea of let's put a polymer pouch in the back of it. Let's heat it up in some kind of a way, and you can do solar, you can do electrical, you can actually do it like over the stove or boiling water. And by the time they graduated from Stanford, they had it up to an hour. At which point, historically, they would then go get jobs, because the prototype would have cost another $500,000 or $1 million. Instead, thankfully, Jim Newton had founded TechShop. They came in, and then magic happened. So we talk about the community and the knowledge that's embedded in the community and interacting with one another to help us all to build our dreams. So Naganon was sitting there. This is a very exciting project. A polymer chemist with 30 years of compounding experience and commercialization came over, completely redid the design of the polymer, and it went from 1 hour to 4 hours. 300% increase? Actually, no, because we're talking about a geography. You drop it in here, it's a 9-fold improvement in the product. This thing has already saved 150,000 babies, and Jane will tell you flat out, if the makerspace didn't exist, this wouldn't exist either. The impact that we've had in the Bay Area, as far as we can tell, is absolutely stunning $12 billion in incremental shareholder value from companies launching out of our 3 spaces in the valley. 2,000 jobs, $200 million in annual salaries. The state of California is pulling more out on the income tax on an annual basis than we invested over the entire 8 years in the valley. And when those shares sell, they're going to pick up another $1 billion too. We estimate that the impact in California is between $1.4 billion and $1.8 billion over the next 10 years for a mere $20 million investment. Thank you very much.
That wonderful presentation on TechShop. And interestingly, Mark issued a challenge to university professors to change their teaching method so that students learn by doing instead of sitting in classroom. And that's exactly what Silvia Figueira is trying to do at Santa Clara University, where she's the director of the Frugal Innovation Lab. So, Silvia?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm Silvia Figueira. I'm a professor of computer engineering in Santa Clara, and I'm also the director of the Frugal Innovation Lab, which is like a wonderful job. And we deal with all these, amazing students doing all kinds of interesting projects to help out around the world. It's actually really cool, my favorite part of the day. So our mission with the Frugal Lab is basically to engage the students and faculty in actually participating in what we call humanitarian projects, a different term for frugal innovation. Basically, projects that will help somebody somewhere. It could be here around the corner, it could be, somewhere that we haven't heard about in Africa or in India. And we do that by basically engaging the student from the beginning. So every student in Santa Clara, engineering student, has to take a course called Engineering 1. So when they are in there, they have to go through a whole process of frugal innovation thinking. What's like to develop technology that is actually useful in a place that is totally different than the one we are used to. So they basically go through this whole lab, actually trying to come up with a solution for different things. To understand the thinking is different. You cannot just make it cheaper or simpler. You have to understand the needs of the community and develop it for that with their resources and things like that. So they learn how to actually think about that. And then through the 4 years, basically, we keep inviting them to do projects or exposing them to talks, and so that they see over and over, and eventually a lot of them actually join the lab or join a professor and basically do a project that, and I'm going to show you some examples. And we do that basically through partnerships. Most of the projects that we work on, or the School of Engineering works on, have a client somewhere. We basically connect with a community in another place or here and understand what they need, and we basically cater for that. We don't come up with our own ideas, because usually those don't work, because we, again, have a Silicon Valley kind of thinking. So we go, and work with the community to actually implement something that they need. So we partner with lots of people. We have been doing this for about 4 years, and we have partners all over the world, and a lot of them are local. Basically, a lot of them are nonprofit organizations that are already doing some good. So we call that helping the helper. We actually work with an organization that is doing some good and help them to do it better. And social enterprises in other countries. The social enterprises are, a term that's actually getting a lot of attention now. Basically, are sustainable companies. They actually have a profit, but they are doing something good for the community. So we partner with them and help them to either do whatever they are doing better, helping them with some kind of technology, or basically sometimes use mobile technology to scale their business. So basically, again, helping some kind of company that's actually already doing something good. Also local industry, so we work closely with lots of companies in the valley. That part is usually, they help us with funding and sometimes mentoring of students. So we basically are covered, and most of my job is actually talking to lots of different people, sometimes, in enterprises in other countries, sometimes just people in Silicon Valley. So what I'm gonna do now is basically give you some examples of projects that the students are working on right now. So the first one is a mobile project. We do lots of mobile projects. It turns out everybody has a phone in the world. It turns out that we can use the phone as a local resource to do something that can help them out. So we do several of those, and this is one example. So I'm the advisor for that one. So 1 year ago, this student, Tyler Vandenberg, he went to Uganda for another program from Santa Clara, and he realized, he's a business student, he realized there was a problem with transportation. So there was a lot of Borden drivers. Basically, the motorcycle drivers are supposed to give people rides, for money. But there was a disconnect between the drivers and the people who need riders in remote locations. So he came up with this idea, what about doing like an Uber-style kind of service for Uganda? So he came back, and he talked to me, and I said, you know what, we can do that. We can do all the system for that. It has to be based on SMS because people don't have access to data yet. We're in a remote location. So the whole project was done by a senior group. And they basically finish up, and now we're basically coming up with the final touches so that Tyler can go back to Uganda in September with a Fulbright, actually, scholarship to start a business in Uganda, with this Uber idea. So it's an Uber-style SMS-based service that's going to be launched in actually 3 weeks. So another example is fight the flood in Ghana. So this is a professor in civil engineering, and he has students right now actually. This summer they went to Ghana and understand that there was a huge problem in a village where that's a picture of the village. The river actually floods a lot and goes to where the red line is. And people cannot cross, and that isolates the village. So the students spent some time there to understand the whole problem, and with the community, they actually figured out where they should make a pedestrian bridge. So when the village is isolated, the kids cannot go to school, they cannot go to the village to buy stuff, so they basically are isolated. And people try to cross, and some of them drown. It's like a big problem. So they work with the community to actually design a bridge, and they are now back in the US fundraising to actually come up with money to go back to Ghana and build, the bridge with the local community. So they're not going to be basically building it. The local community will be building it, and they're going to basically be managing the construction. So this is another project that we actually have in the School of Engineering right now. And by the way, they are fundraising for that. So if anybody is interested in helping building a bridge in Ghana, let me know. So another project is Cook Stove, and this is a project in electrical engineering. So you probably heard about that. Cooking fumes is a big problem in lots of places. People live in little houses and they cook inside, and there are lots of fumes, and a lot of people have lots of, serious health problems because of that. And I actually, in our lab, we helped build several kinds of different stoves to actually kind of make that better. These people have a different idea. Again, they are working with community in Africa for that, and their different solution is they came up with a device, it's the one down there, to basically use the heat from the stove to actually power this ventilation system. So instead of using a different stove, use the same, but get the fumes out, using the heat that is already in the room anyways. And also they came up with an extra kind of like a side project for that, which is basically a device to pasteurize water, using the same energy. So the energy taken from the heat is going to basically kind of get the fumes out and also clean the water or boil the water so that people can drink, which is another problem that people have. Okay, the last one here is a global health project, and we call that AquaSafe. That's a collaboration between electrical engineering, bioengineering, and computer engineering, and is based on detecting contaminants in water. So the bioengineers have come up with this biosensor that actually can tell how much of specific contaminants are in the water, and generate some kind of current. I'm not a bioengineer, so I just say that in a very high level. I'm part of that, but I'm in the mobile part of that. So the sensor generates some kind of current depending on the level of contaminants in the water, which goes through a very low power, low cost device that translates that into a table of voltages that are sent to the phone, and the phone can show on the spot if the water is contaminated or not, by how much. So yeah, you can do that in a lab, but usually people get the water sent to a lab, and then they have to wait for the result to come back. But they are thirsty, so they're going to drink the water anyway. So the idea here is to basically be able to tell on the spot if the water is contaminated or not. We have one working for arsenic. This summer they were working with nitrate, and there are other ideas that are in the works. So basically, the idea here is be able to detect different things on the spot with a very low power, low cost kind of device. And again, because the phone is already available, the phone is not included in the price, so basically it's just the electrical part and the sensor that are part of the cost. And the device is really low power. It actually steals power from the phone, so it doesn't have any batteries or anything like that. It's a very simple circuit. Okay, so like I said before, we are doing lots of mobile projects, and it turns out most of our projects are actually in the Bay Area. And NBC actually did like a piece on us the other day because we were helping, with mobile some homeless people, and maybe.
Well, Bay Area colleges are filled with computer engineering students dreaming of creating that next big billion-dollar app.
But a group at one university says it's more interested in how many they can help rather than how much money it can make. Garvin Thomas is here with tonight's Bay Area Proud.
You know, it's called the Frugal Innovation Lab at Santa Clara University. They've been around for 4 years with the goal of developing technology, much of it mobile, to help people in need. More often than not, that was in other countries. But then they heard a surprising statistic and that they saw as an opportunity to help people right in their backyard.
On the streets of San Jose, there are many things the homeless must go without. But for a surprising number, a mobile phone is not one of them. In fact, according to one study, 68% of homeless here have one. It is that much a part of modern life.
And they will eat less to pay for the phone if necessary because the phone is that important. So what about the payment? Have they figured that out?
Silvia Figueira, it should be said, is not an expert on the homeless, but she is an expert on technology. And in her role as head of Santa Clara University's Frugal Innovation Lab, an expert in using technology for good.
That's nice to know that, you know, with our computing skills, we could actually help somebody.
You can search by zip code.
Which brings us to Sushma Gupta's project. Her app, meant specifically for homeless youth, gives them instant access to information about food, housing, and medical care, to name just a few. It has the potential to help 7,000 in Santa Clara County alone.
So I'm trying to put technology to the good use. So I'll just show you a demo.
Pratusha Joganibili's project aims to bring ride sharing to remote portions of Uganda. Think of it as Uber for rural Africa.
We just take technology to them and we are making a difference for them.
None of them will likely get rich off their inventions, but they are certainly enriching the lives of others.
And this is a very Santa Clara thing. I think we attract that kind of student that actually is passionate about doing something with their time for good.
Back to those homeless apps, because so many homeless have the phone, it's with them obviously all the time. And the information to get them more quickly. They have an SMS, messaging system that'll alert homeless if cold weather's coming, or things like that. So really seeing all that technology and a way to use it to help people out.
Okay, so helpful. Thanks so much, Garvin.
Thank you, Garvin.
Okay, thank you, and I'll be around if you have any questions.
Thanks a lot, Silvia. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we have come to top hour. So at this point, we're going to transition to the Q&A. I know that we piled a lot of content on you. So I invite all the panelists to join us here on stage and fire away your questions.
Hi, Professor Figueira. I was at a talk right in Stanford several years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was about, or maybe it was right here, about cook stoves. And, you know, when you were talking about it, it seemed that there was a real strong correlation between the two projects. And I'm just wondering, how much cooperation or communication do you have with other similar projects? And I guess this can be addressed to the rest of the panel as well.
Okay, so I can start by talking about the stoves. Yes, we do talk to other universities. We go to conferences. We know what other people are doing. There's a couple of big conferences in humanitarian technology right now, and they all publish these ideas. And we, in Santa Clara, we actually have worked on a couple of stoves already anyway. So depending on the community, different solutions apply. Usually that's like, you know, the best way to put it. Santa Clara, even the first slide was actually on a big stove that they did for Nicaragua once. So different communities have different needs. And so the community they are working right now with, you know, really like the idea of having the ventilation system actually getting energy out of the heat instead of actually changing the way they cook. I don't know if anybody has.
Other questions, comments, best practices you want to share? Oh, this is a shy crowd. I know it's the end of the day, but still, come on. Okay, I can't promise you a free book, but I have, you know, there'll be some incentive if you ask questions. So.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing your experiences. You know, it occurs to me that this is more about improving the impact of innovation, frugal innovation rather than frugal innovation itself. And I'm just wondering if all of you have ideas for innovators for finding partnerships and scaling up and making it, turning frugal innovation into impact. If people are outside of university contexts or maybe don't live near a tech shop.
I mean, that's a good question, right? I mean, just the four of you, I'm just kind of processing real time because I can see, for example, some of the ideas that could come from the university side that could actually be taken to a tech shop. I mean, actually, the example of the Embrace is a good one, Mark, isn't it? Because it kind of started in Stanford as a kind of academic project.
Right.
And then, it became a prototype and then eventually a company. So I think that's a good kind of question, which is, do you see kind of an ecosystem forming where you can actually start your project, in your garage or in a university, and then eventually there could be a partnership where you come in. But even you, if I could ask you provocatively, is there a next step for you to say, you know what, you can have a, like the square that gets incubated at tech shop, but then where you go next?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the early stages of the development of the maker movement and the ecosystem. And it has been identified as one of the largest gaps is the, okay, now that you've got the prototype, how do you get to 500? Getting to 1 million is actually easy. There are lots of folks that would be glad to take that order. It's the 500, the 1,000, that's the trick. And so we're seeing some movement in creating services and products around that solution set. So for example, I love this one, Seed, out of China. What they've essentially done is they've created an API for manufacturing electronics in that they say, here are the 10,000 components that are in our library. If you stick to these components, we can manufacture 500 of something in our manufacturing line. Now that's tough because there are millions and millions of possible components, but it's an interesting approach to, if you keep your solution set to this kind of box, then we can solve the 500 unit problem. Flextronics has famously moved into town, and their objective is to try to push down the manufacturing requirement below the 50,000 or the 10,000 units. So we're starting to see those. And yes, thanks for the segue. We have announced a pilot project with Fujitsu, the large manufacturing company out of Japan. They're particularly good at roboticizing manufacturing lines and have demonstrated an ability to actually make money at like 10,000 units and below on a single item. And their objective is to start piloting and see if we can push that down further and further, using AI to develop the manufacturing line and so forth. So it's still really early. I'm hopeful. I think the ecosystem is developing fairly quickly to try to solve that particular problem. The real trick is to get out of the house, get out of the office, get out of the university, and get into the community and start asking this question in a broader context. Because the solutions are there, they're just the APIs aren't yet, but that'll change. Great question.
One thing I would add to that is, oftentimes, in the Silicon Valley context, we think about the ecosystem as, startups, investors, and then universities. That's what we know as a cluster concept. But I think what's also happening is that there is a B2B dimension to everything we talked about. So what you begin to see is large companies like Ford and others are now beginning to team up as well with these kind of companies, the makers and the frugalinators.
Yeah,
so that is going to be the exciting story in coming years as well.
I met with a retailer yesterday, mid-sized retailer, who said, I don't want to carry 10,000 of something. I want to carry 1,000. And could we create an exclusive to create 1,000 of something and sell it through our retail stores or online? I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of innovation happening.
Yes. Other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Thomas.
I think the mic, who was first? Okay, in the back, and then we'll come back to you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you again for the presentations. In the university, when we teach people, we used to say about NASA that, why use gold when platinum would do? And we sort of think about building really, really expensive, the most exotic things we can do that has the greatest performance and things like that. For frugal innovation, is this something that you can teach? How do you teach this? Or is this something that a certain set of people actually gravitate to? So is there a way to cause people to think in that way, or is that just the way they're born?
That's actually a really good question, because we've been trying different processes actually to approach that. So the idea is to actually get people to think about it. So that's our approach right now. We basically give them, some examples of, things. You have to start somewhere. So give examples of things that we have been doing or other people have been doing. And then give them problems and get them in groups to discuss and with, like one of us that actually understand the process. And it's amazing the kinds of things that they actually come up with. And so the whole idea is to show the process and then get them to start thinking about it and think about through, the years until they finally get, to the experience. But it's an interesting process to understand because it's not their everyday kind of idea.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm working on a project to reduce perishable food waste. And I want to know, your students are working on something in that line, like letting homeless know where to get free food. So I want to know if I can work with some of your students on my project and how does the university handle that?
Talk to me afterwards and I'll give you my card and get in touch with me and we'll be glad to form a team.
Thank you.
And I would be personally interested because I don't know if you know statistic, but I think it's only 20% of the food waste in America food is really recycled, which is really a horror story. So, so clearly we need to address that. So other questions? Yes, please.
What sort of outreach programs are there to rope in younger than college students to these facilities and these programs?
So we launched a trailer with Fujitsu just 3 or 4 months ago, and it's actually done way better than we were anticipating. It's a 34-foot long trailer. We now have 6 small 3D printers in it, 2 laser cutters, a whole bunch of iPad-type computers with 123D make on it. And we're now running, we can run 1,000 kids through this thing in a week. And we can take them from never seeing a 3-dimensional modeling software program, never seeing a laser cutter or a 3D printer, to actually designing, developing, and producing their own little toy and taking it home that afternoon. And you should see the smiles on these kids' faces. It is just a remarkable experience. And the exposure is, I believe the exposure is critical at the 8, 9, 10, 11 year range, because that's when they start saying, I'm not good at math and I can't do this. And if you can get them excited about 3-dimensional modeling to build toys, maybe they'll delay that decision until they get a good math teacher and they discover they're actually good at math.
And there's another example in the same vein. I talked about the Raspberry Pi. So these guys teamed up with the Khan Academy, which is based here, which teaches math and science using online video tutorials. So they have now something called the KA Lite, Khan Academy Lite. Essentially, they take all the Wikipedia content and they can put it in a chip. So this gets shipped to places like India, and then in a kit, and then kids who are below 10 years old, they assemble the tablet themselves in 1 hour, and they start learning everything about science and technology from that. And the whole cost is about $40 per device. So these are the kind of new models that are emerging as well. So next question, please. Yes. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Greg. This is for Maker Shop in Santa Clara University. I've been doing a lot of work over my career with nonprofits, Marine Mammal Center, San Francisco Zoo, Children's Discovery Museum, and many others. You started talking about kids, which is great, because I'm a homeschool dad. My kids started coding when they were 12. Are you doing outreach to pre-college kids and even below high school levels? And what level are you approaching those kids at?
Yeah, we have done some. We don't do it all the time, but we have done some. The museum, the Tech in San Jose, they have one that actually, I think it's for middle schoolers, and we have participated in that. So basically they have 4 workshops for different kinds of projects that they have every year, and one of them is for mobile computing, another for clean water, and their goal is to actually kind of educate middle schoolers. And so that's as young as I've seen. So we have done that with them. That's an example. We have others, but I think that's a good example of a workshop. They bring them in together on a Sunday afternoon, so there is like a little instruction of what the problem is in the world that we are trying to solve, and then they see like a little lab that actually solves the problem.
So we target kids as young as 8 years old. We have summer programs, after-school programs, and during the year we actually have a number of homeschool folks that come through, both charter schools and homeschools. We haven't seen the traditional public schools yet. There's a lot of issues around that. That's actually why we did the trailer, is we're like the bookmobile and we're coming to them. 1/3 of all the libraries have already said that they want to have a maker space in their library. And that's, by the way, there are 140,000 of them, so that's tens of thousands of libraries that are going to build a little maker space. So it's very encouraging to get the kids exposed. It's obvious to me that every high school is going to come back and they will have shop again. It's going to be called a maker space. But there are 30,000 of those high schools. They have to do it. They don't have a choice, really, because it solves two problems. It helps the kids that are going to go to trade school get excited about the trades, and it helps the kids that are going to college get excited about STEM education, all in the same space. And it's clear that this is going to happen. In fact, we've launched the Makerspace Academy to help teach people how to own and operate little mini maker spaces. We've already run 2 cohorts through it, and will eventually be online. To be able to support, there'll be tens of thousands of these little maker spaces all over the United States and around the world. It's just like the next thing.
Gentleman here had a question, and then we'll come to the back. Any questions for Bruce and Michel as well? Would be good as well to get this.
So my name is Srinivas, and actually I have 2 points. One is a question, and the second is more of a thought. The first question is to you, Bruce, on gThrive. What about the power requirements on that? Because you have a stake that goes into the ground. What is the expected longevity? Because at the end of the day, success comes with a multiple set of things that you solve. I'd like to know. 2, along that same pathway, the sensors that you have in there to detect, they are pretty simple. I totally get that. The value of doing pH measurements in soil, that probably has a market or an n-fold value, because you don't want to douse the fields with too much of fertilizer either. That's one thing that I was going to ask of you. A question that popped up. To me, frugality begins up here. It's a thought. It's an awareness. A few years ago, there were large corporations, because I come from very large businesses. None of them exist anymore. It's a shame. And over a cup of coffee, we would talk about problems and how to solve them. Time to market also includes the cost to develop a technology. So frugality begins in a corporate labs, like I used to be at Eastman Kodak in Rochester, not too far away from PARC or the old Xerox in Webster. The way you start corralling people to bring people together is missing today. If there was some kind of a network to say, hey, I have this solution, can somebody tell me what else you have that we both can sit together and develop it? I think that would be phenomenally powerful. I don't know if others feel the same way or not, because all large R&D is gone. There is no IBM as we know. There's no AT&T Bell Labs or whatever. So anyway.
Okay, so.
Yeah, baby. Let's keep it that way.
So to address the power issue, we sealed a battery in here, and we did that for 2 reasons. One is you can imagine changing batteries out in the field is non-trivial. Second, it pushes the cost up. Batteries are cheap, but the seal that needs to be designed to hold up to, say, a yearly battery replacement in the field with fertilizers and tractors and other things moving around. So part of the design was, how do I do a protocol that will last? This will run for about 6 years. We guarantee 3, and in 6 years it's going to be totally obsolete. And you mentioned pH. I would love to add more sensors, and I will as I can. We're working closely with a partner that's developed what I think is the first in-soil nitrate sensor, and that will be rolling out next year. pH, I don't know of one yet.
I have one.
That can stay in the soil without calibration or corrosion.
Right. So ours is glass-free, calibration-free.
Excellent.
It's robust.
So, these are the things we're looking for. We didn't start pushing for that because the growers told us that they measure the pH once or twice a year. They didn't need it continuously. So we put the things in which you really needed all the time. So that was part of the whole solution choice. Sometimes you push the cost up a little bit to save labor, because that's an overall cost of the product.
Just
And we have.
Can I say something? Just
Yeah, sure,
addressing
Silvia,
what
go
you
ahead,
were
go ahead.
saying before, there are a couple of organizations actually trying to address that, the fact that these are all disconnected kind of ideas. So Net Hope is one of them. They basically try to connect people doing kinds of technology innovations with the need. And USAID is also actually putting together a lab for that to basically connect everybody who is working in that area. And I can give you information. Apparently, you were also interested in that. If you guys want more, I can send you some links.
Great. We'll take two more questions, and then we'll open it up for our reception outside.
Hi, I'm Casey. I have a high school senior who loves math and science. In fact, is very good with chemistry and physics. And he just decided in the summer that he wants to study engineering. It didn't come up before, and he decided chemical engineering is the one, but I'm not sure he knows what he's getting into. So I'm wondering if any of you folks, in front there, or anyone in the audience would have any thoughts if there's a program during the school year, or just anybody who could talk to about that. I'm not in any of the field there, and I was a long time ago, but I'm sort of out of that field now. I'm in business. So I would appreciate any thoughts you might have, whether it's Santa Clara University or TechShop, Mark there. I would appreciate it.
Mark, wasn't there something with the STEM education that you were involved in or something? There's some interest to kind of, get the kids to be interested in STEM,
Yeah, I mean, we do it at the base level of just exposing them to the tools and getting them excited. This is an interesting idea of meet a chemist, or meet an engineer. It'd be kind of fun to do 2 or 3 times a year, just have the staff and members. I think it's an interesting idea. Yeah, no, so we should try it at our Redwood City location and see if we get kids to come. Yeah, that'd be great. And what's particularly important there is to make sure that we have people of color and gender across that, so that it's somebody like me that's doing the project. We found that to be very important.
Great.
Okay, we'll take one last question here.
Thanks for waiting.
Thank you. My name is Josh Abend. I can't help but come here because all the good stuff is visible. I want to ask all of you who would be involved in working with these young students. And the question is, though I don't know which of you have technology background or engineering or what have you, but I'd be interested in knowing whether these very young students have, when you get these ideas from them, okay, where do they come from? Do you give them any training in what we talk about in problem solving and creativity, all those kinds of things? Or does it just emanate from them directly out of their own sense of passion and creativity? What is your experience? And I would direct that to anyone who would care to answer.
Well, I would say both. So there is, some projects come from creativity, and the students have an amazing imagination and come up with all kinds of interesting ideas, and they travel, they go abroad, and in my case, they live with the communities, and they come back with all kinds of, ideas on how they could help. And also, a bunch of our projects come from the need. So basically, they are there to solve a problem. It's not that they're going to come up with the solution themselves, but they are supposed to come up with a solution that is low power, low cost, with local resources. So it's a very engineering problem that they are solving. But it's both. It's basically creativity and also engineering hard work that actually get put together.
Right. So I have 2 slides to show to wrap up, and then we will actually probably have Steve give. There is just this I wanted to show. I was dying to show this. I've been waiting for so many weeks to show this. This is an interesting article that came out in San Jose Mercury News from Michel, who kind of criticized the fact that many of the startups, at least in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, are too busy solving the rich people's problem who actually don't have problems. So hopefully today, you saw actually, a bunch of entrepreneurs were actually tackling some very, pressing socioeconomic issues, in a different way. So I think that's quite rewarding. And then there's also a website that we talked about bringing people together and connect them. And this is a modest attempt to do it. It's called frugalinnovationhub.com, where we want to actually build a global community of frugal innovators. With that, I want to thank you very much, and I believe, Steve, you'll be delivering the closing remarks.
I just wanted to thank Navi and the panel. I think it was a really interesting presentation and a pretty broad-ranging, set of ideas that we showed you today. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We definitely appreciate the opportunity to hear from these set of folks. And so thank you for your time today. And we've got some refreshments out in the lobby. And I think as an ad for our next presentation, we're going to have Anna here tell you what's up next, because I don't know.
So thanks for coming. So the next forum is September 30th on a Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about California climate change and policy and technology innovation. So it's a very good one. We'll have Wade Crowfoot, and he is the Cabinet Secretary and Senior Advisor to Governor Brown. So again, that's September 30th on Wednesday. Great. Thank you very much.